The quiet before the storm. You begin in a quiet hour, the kind of hour when the world seems to breathe in long, slow rhythms. Imagine yourself standing at the edge of the Mediterranean Sea in the early 3rd century AD, when the Roman Empire still stretches like a great bronze shield around this inland ocean. Dawn rests softly on the horizon. The water moves with a muted shimmer, carrying the gentle scent of salt and distant harbors. You hear the faint clatter of fishermen preparing their nets, the distant bark of dogs in nearby villages, and the steady, peaceful creak of wooden masts rocking against stone piers. This is the Rome that people remember as eternal, stable, and serene, the Rome built by centuries of emperors, soldiers, merchants, farmers, and dreamers. Though its glory has begun to fade in small, almost invisible ways, the empire still feels immense, unified, and radiant. A calm veil lingers over its roads and temples, over its city gates and marketplaces. You can still walk from the sands of Africa to the forests of Germania on the same well-laid stones, sheltered beneath the same eagle standards. For a moment there is peace, not absolute, not perfect, but a kind of quiet dignity that settles like dust after a long parade. As you begin to walk inland, the world unfolds slowly. Olive groves shimmer beneath the morning sun, their silvery leaves whispering with each drifting breeze. Farmers move between the rows, carrying baskets, muttering soft greetings to one another. Small shrines stand at the crossroads, decorated with fading paint, but still fragrant with the smoke of incense left by passing travelers. A mule cart rumbles gently along the path, its wheels stirring little clouds of dust. You continue toward the interior, where the great rhythms of Roman life beat steadily. At riverbanks, women wash linens with practiced calm, dipping cloth in cool water, wringing it with the strength of habit. Children chase each other along stone walls, their shadows long in the morning light. In towns, bakers pull warm loaves from clay ovens, filling the narrow streets with familiar scents. You hear the murmur of shopkeepers opening their stalls, the scrape of bronze tools in workshops, the soft chanting of priests tending morning rites at quiet shrines. Rome even now is full of life, not just the life of emperors and legions, but the gentle life of ordinary people who rise with the sun, work with their hands, and sleep under familiar roofs. Their world feels stable, predictable, and rooted in centuries of tradition. Yet if you listen closely beneath the rustling reeds and market chatter, you begin to sense the faintest tremble. A single thread in the tapestry of empire is shifting, subtle enough that most ignore it, but present enough that those with keener instincts feel a strange unease stirring beneath the calm. You journey northward, carried by imaginations of paved roads stretching endlessly into rolling hills. Along the Via Flaminia, travelers walk with purposeful strides, unaware that the age of security they take for granted is nearing its end. Soldiers stationed at distant garrisons sharpen their blades and polish their armor, not out of fear but from discipline. They still believe in the empire's strength and its ability to outlast storms, as it always has. But something in the air feels brittle. In the city of Rome itself, life remains majestic. Senators in flowing togas debate beneath colonnades, scholars read scrolls in shaded porticos, and merchants conduct business beneath the towering arches of the Forum. Temples glow with the soft flicker of oil lamps. The Tiber rolls gently beneath its bridges, carrying reflections of the marble city across its surface. It is here, in the heart of the empire, that the subtle tensions begin to gather. Whispers move between households, carried in the low murmur of dinner conversations. Taxes rise, pressing harder on those who already struggle. Rumors spread of legions grumbling on distant frontiers. Stories drift from Germania and Syria of tribes gathering, of borders growing restless and thin. These murmurs are faint, often brushed aside, but they accumulate like dust in the corners of a once bright hall. And always beyond the walls lies the army, loyal, powerful, and restless. The soldiers of Rome have grown accustomed to their own strength. Many serve in remote provinces far from the marble wonders of the capital. They live harsh lives exposed to wind and rain, fighting enemies whose names change like the seasons. They rarely see emperors except in statues or on coins. To these men, power feels distant, detached, fragile. Over time, they have learned that the emperor's authority depends not solely on lineage or law, but on the loyalty of the legions who bear the weight of Rome's borders. This quiet truth lingers beneath the surface, an ember waiting for wind, and that wind begins to gather in the final years of the Severan dynasty. Emperor Alexander Severus, young and earnest, attempts to bring order to the frontiers through negotiation rather than battle. His approach, gentle and measured, is welcomed by senators and administrators. But to hardened soldiers in the cold forests of the Rhine, such concessions feel like weakness. Suspicion spreads like frost on winter leaves. You walk through these forests, now following the muted footfalls of legionaries marching between wooden palisades. The air is crisp, filled with the scent of pine and smoke. Tribes press at the borders bold in ways they were not a generation ago. The soldiers mutter in low voices as they carry out their duties. They have bled for the empire. They have buried comrades beneath unfamiliar soil. And many feel abandoned by distant rulers who do not understand the world of sword and frontier wind. It is here in this tension that the empire's calm begins to fracture. As night falls across the empire from the deserts of Africa to the mountains of Thrace, a hush spreads through the land. Campfires burn in distant military outposts. Lamps flicker in rural villas. The great domes of Roman temples glow softly against the darkening sky. And beneath the peaceful surface, something approaches, quiet but inexorable. The crisis of the 3rd century has not yet begun, but its shadow, long and cold, is already reaching across the empire. You feel it in the slight stillness of the evening air, in the faint tremor beneath the calm. Soon, one act, a single violent act, will shatter this delicate peace. For now you breathe in the last quiet moments of a world that still feels whole. The death of an emperor. The quiet veil of dawn lifts once more, and you find yourself walking along a cold frontier road in the early spring of 235 A.D. The forests of Germania rise around you, dark and tall, their branches still bare from winter. A thin mist hangs above the earth, veiling the shapes of trees and watchtowers. The world feels suspended between breaths. You hear only the faint crunch of gravel beneath your steps, and, somewhere in the distance, the muted clang of hammered iron. Ahead lies the Roman camp, where Emperor Alexander Severus has come to confront a restless army. The emperor has traveled from the comforts of Rome to this lonely border, believing he can soothe the soldiers through patience, generosity, and a promise of negotiation with the Germanic tribes. He is young, soft-spoken, thoughtful, a man who prefers diplomacy to bloodshed. Yet in this cold frontier air, his kindness feels fragile, like a warm ember cupped between trembling hands. You walk through the gates of the encampment, past rows of tents made of stiff leather, glistening with dew. Fires smolder faintly, sending pale smoke twisting into the morning light. Soldiers gather in quiet knots, their faces stern, their cloaks wrapped tightly around their shoulders. Some sharpen swords that have already seen too much war. Others look toward the emperor's pavilion with narrowed, uncertain eyes. There is tension here, an invisible pressure, pulsing beneath the surface. You sense it in the way men speak in low voices, in the way their glances follow each movement around the camp. Rome is far away, and in this distant corner of the empire, loyalty has grown thin as frost-bitten rope. At the center of the camp stands Alexander Severus's tent draped in purple cloth, its entrance guarded by still loyal soldiers who shift uneasily in the cold. Inside, the emperor leans over maps tracing the bend of the Rhine River with a slender hand. His mother, Julia Mamaea, stands beside him, a strong, educated woman whose influence has guided policy since her son's ascent to power. The emperor speaks softly, insisting that negotiations with the tribes may spare Roman lives and restore peace. His voice is gentle, almost pleading, as though he hopes the very sound of calm can settle the storm gathering outside. He believes that offering tribute will appease the enemy and ease the strain on the legions. But beyond the tent's thin canvas walls, the soldiers whisper differently. They fear that mercy will be mistaken for weakness. You step outside again, drawn by the murmuring voices of the army. The sky grows pale with early sunlight, revealing the grim faces of men hardened by a lifetime of frontier war. They have watched comrades fall in battles against tribes who return again and again like winter storms. They are weary of leaders who seem to understand politics but not the edge of a blade. A centurion speaks beneath his breath, "We need an emperor of iron, not of silk." Another nods, one who marches with us, one who fights beside us. Their words hum across the camp like a low, dangerous note. And in the center of their murmurs stands a towering figure, Gaius Julius Verus Maximinus, known to the legion simply as Maximinus Thrax, a soldier's soldier, a man who rose from the ranks, a man built like a fortress of bone and muscle. His presence alone seems to reshape the camp, drawing the eyes of every restless legionary. Maximinus does not speak loudly, nor does he openly challenge the emperor. He simply exists, a living symbol of the strength the soldiers crave. A man who knows the sting of cold iron, the ache of frost, the hunger of the frontier. His hands are scarred, his face weathered, his voice deep and steady. The soldiers trust him in a way they never trusted the distant, sheltered emperor. And trust on the edge of empire is the difference between loyalty and revolt. As the morning deepens, the mood shifts sharply. A sudden stillness settles over the camp, heavy and brittle. A faint wind stirs the banners above the tents, making them flap like distant thunder. The murmur of the soldiers grows louder, more heated. You feel as though the very earth beneath your feet is trembling. Then, with a quiet ripple of motion, the soldiers begin to move, not toward the frontier, not toward the tribal lands, but toward the emperor's tent. Their steps are deliberate, strong, irresistible. Inside, Alexander Severus hears the rising voices, the growing commotion. He steps out from the tent, wrapped in a cloak of imperial purple. His expression is a mix of confusion, hurt, and dawning realization. His mother stands behind him, her face pale, her hands clenched as though she is holding onto something slipping from her grasp. The soldiers' ranks pause before him, a wall of hardened faces illuminated by the cold morning light. Their breaths plume in the air like smoke. Their eyes fix upon him without warmth. Alexander tries to speak. His voice trembles, but he lifts his chin and attempts to remind the men of the empire they serve the peace, they protect the lives that might be spared through negotiation. He appeals to their loyalty, to their shared identity as Romans, but the tide has already turned. A single shout breaks the stillness, not a word of devotion, but a declaration of betrayal. Maximinus, Emperor. The cry is taken up at once, swelling like a wave, crashing through the camp. Soldiers raise their weapons, pounding their shields. The sound echoes against the wooden palisades and rolls into the forest beyond. Maximinus, Maximinus. The emperor steps back, shock washing across his features. His mother reaches for him, her voice a desperate whisper. But the soldiers advance driven by anger, fear, and the belief that Rome needs a different kind of master. The final moments pass quickly, swallowed by the cold wind. Blades flash, shouts rise. The purple cloak falls to the dust. When the clamor fades, the emperor who once dreamed of peace lies silent on the frozen earth beside his fallen mother. The Severan dynasty, which had guided Rome for decades, ends not in ceremony, but in violence. And with this single act, this brutal, irreversible moment, the quiet world of Rome shatters. The crisis of the 3rd century has begun. The empire trembles as though awakening from a long dream to find itself standing on the edge of a precipice. And you, standing amid the smoke and silence of the frontier camp, feel the chill of a new age settling across the land, an age that will stretch for nearly 50 years, pulling the Roman world into darkness before the dawn of renewal arrives. The rise of the soldier emperors. Night settles over the empire like a vast trembling cloak, and you find yourself walking through the quiet aftermath of Alexander Severus's death. The wind moves through the forest with a thin, mournful whistle carrying the scent of pine resin and the lingering smoke of abandoned campfires. Somewhere in the darkness, the Rhine murmurs against its banks, a cold and restless reminder of the frontier's dangers. And in the center of this shifting world stands a man newly crowned by force raised not by senate nor inheritance, but by the raw will of the army. Maximinus Thrax, the first of the soldier emperors. You walk with him along the muddy paths of the military encampment. His steps are heavy yet steady, as though he carries the entire weight of Rome on his scarred shoulders. He is no aristocrat groomed in marble halls. His hands are calloused from years of sword drills, his voice rough from shouting orders over howling winds. He embodies the frontier, harsh, practical, unadorned. The soldiers who surround him look at him with respect that borders on awe. He is one of them, forged in the same cold, the same hunger, the same endless campaigns. This is the beginning of a new order. But with it comes a quiet truth that hums beneath the surface, a truth as sharp as the edge of a gladius. If the army can raise an emperor, the army can just as easily cast him down. In the soft glow of early morning, you travel across provinces reshaped by the emperor's restless energy. Maximinus marches constantly, refusing to linger in Rome. He distrusts the Senate, despises the luxury of the capital, and feels most secure surrounded by the creak of armor and the smoke of military fires. Roads echo with the tramp of legionary boots. Camps rise and fall as armies move like steel tides across the landscape. For frontier soldiers, this is a golden moment. They feel seen, valued, honored by a ruler who has lived their hardships. But for senators in Rome, men accustomed to refined debate, marble porticos, and political rituals, Maximinus is a threat, a barbarian-born outsider, a usurper, a dagger pointed at the heart of tradition, Whispers travel through the marble corridors of the capital. Lamps burn late into the night in dim chambers where senators murmur of tyranny, instability, and the need for a return to lawful rule. They speak quietly, always glancing over their shoulders, aware that their words could bring ruin if carried to the wrong ears. And so the pattern begins, a pattern that will repeat over and over through the long crisis ahead. An emperor rises by the sword. He rules by fear or loyalty. He falls to another man who promises strength. You move now through this shifting world as if drifting through a dream where the scenery changes each time you blink. The empire becomes a patchwork of ambitions, each province holding men who claim they can steer Rome better than the one who currently wears the purple. Maximinus rules for only 3 turbulent years. His victories on the frontier are real, but his absence from Rome breeds suspicion. Taxes rise to pay for constant campaigns. The Senate grows desperate. The people groan under burdens they feel they did not earn. And somewhere in the whispers of distant cities, rebellion forms like storm clouds gathering over a restless sea. In 238, as spring approaches, a revolt flares in Africa Proconsularis. Wealthy landowners and provincial elites proclaim 2 elderly nobles, Gordian I and his son Gordian II, as emperors. Their rule lasts only weeks before Roman loyalists crush the uprising, leaving both men dead. But the spark has already leapt into dry grass. The Senate in Rome, cornered and fearful, declares Maximinus a public enemy. The empire fractures further. You walk along the roads of northern Italy, where Maximinus marches southward to reclaim his authority. His legions, exhausted by constant war, trudge through muddy fields and rain-swept valleys. Supplies dwindle, morale cracks, and when they reach Aquileia, a city closed against them, frustration turns to despair. The siege drags on, and hunger gnaws like a silent beast. One night beneath a pale moon, the emperor's own soldiers slip into his tent and end his life just as they ended the life of the man before him. The cycle tightens. As Maximinus falls, the Senate desperately names new emperors, but each one spirals into the same fate, rebellion, mutiny, execution. You see men ascending the throne for weeks, sometimes days. You hear the clatter of soldiers shouting oaths of loyalty at dawn and drawing blades at dusk. Coins are minted with new faces so frequently that people begin to lose track of who rules. From the storm of shifting rulers emerges a brief period of shimmer, the boy Emperor Gordian III, beloved for his youth and hope. You see him standing beneath the bright sun of Antioch, his purple cloak trailing softly behind him, his eyes wide with the solemn responsibility of empire. But even he is swallowed by the growing tempest. His death, perhaps by illness, perhaps by treachery, leaves the empire once again in the hands of a military commander. Philip the Arab rises next, his reign marked by ambition and a fragile attempt at stability. He negotiates peace with Persia, celebrates the 1,000-year anniversary of Rome in great ceremony, and dreams of restoring unity. But the legions on the Danube, unimpressed by distant festivities, raise their own rival Decius, a serious and austere general with a deep loyalty to the old Roman virtues. The armies meet in violent clash. Philip falls. Decius becomes emperor. And then, like a dark omen rolling from the east, a plague sweeps the empire, a shadow that follows Decius wherever he marches. Entire villages fall silent beneath its weight. Fields grow barren. Cities light funeral pyres day and night. Even the emperor himself is lost in battle against the Goths, leaving behind a broken world that seems to crumble further with each passing month. And still the pattern continues. Valerian rises. Then Gallienus, his son, fights to preserve what remains. The empire splits into three: the Gallic Empire in the west, the Palmyrene Empire in the east, and a shrinking Roman core in the center. You feel as though you are walking through shifting sand, unable to find solid ground. Anywhere you turn, another soldier ascends to power. Another rival challenges him. Another civil war ignites under the weight of desperation. The Roman Empire, once a unified world encircling the Mediterranean like a ring of light, has become a storm of competing ambitions. Legions fight legions. Generals claim crowns like discarded helmets. The people suffer beneath the endless churn of power. You walk through quiet villages where children ask who the emperor is, and their parents do not know the answer. You step into marketplaces where coins bear faces of rulers, long dead, traded without trust. You pass through border towns where soldiers argue over which commander they serve. The age of soldier emperors has dawned, and the empire trembles under their heavy, shifting boots. Through it all, a single truth grows clearer. With each passing year, Rome is no longer ruled by stability or tradition, but by the sharpened edge of military might. And soon new threats from beyond the frontiers will test the empire in ways it has never known. Invasions on every horizon. You begin this next chapter in the half-light of a restless dawn, standing on a lonely stretch of the Danube frontier. The river rolls past you, like a wide, whispering serpent, its surface brushed by a cold wind that carries the first scent of distant storms. The soft glow of morning paints the water in pale gold, yet the world feels uneasy. Birds circle above the tree line crying faint warnings. Across the river, where mist clings to dark forests, you sense movement, quiet, deliberate, and unfamiliar. For centuries this frontier has been Rome's shield, but now, in the deepening years of the 3rd century, the shield has begun to crack. You stand beside legionaries who peer across the river with anxious eyes. Their armor bears dents from too many battles, their cloaks are patched, and the confidence that once radiated from Rome's frontier guards has thinned. They murmur of new names, Alemanni, Franks, Goths, tribes, not unknown to Rome, but now more numerous, more coordinated, more daring than ever before. The Danube's waters ripple softly, but the calm is deceptive. On the far bank within the shadowed woods, shapes gather like a tide, waiting for the moon's pull. And then, as the sun rises fully, the storm breaks. The first Gothic raids begin with the suddenness of lightning striking parched earth. They surge across the river, not as scattered war bands, but as full-fledged armies carrying with them a force Rome had never before seen from these tribes. Villages burn along the riverbanks, smoke curling into the sky like dark twisting fingers. Forts long considered secure fall in days. The earth shakes beneath the thunder of foreign boots. You follow the path of the invasion southward, passing through small towns where terrified families flee with what little they can carry. Chickens squawk beneath hurried arms. Children cry as their parents pull them along dusty roads. Old men lean heavily on walking sticks, trying to keep pace with the tide of fear-driven migration. Everywhere people speak of the same things: riders emerging from forests, arrows blackening the sky, flames rising from distant hills. The world that once felt safe beneath Rome's watchful gaze now shivers under the weight of uncertainty. But the Danube is only the beginning. Travel now westward, carried by the imagery of winds sweeping across the Rhine frontier. The forests of Germania stretch vast and ancient, whispering secrets older than Rome itself. Here, too, the air vibrates with danger. The Alemanni, fierce and ambitious, press against the Roman border with renewed strength. They test the weakened legions, striking at fortifications, seizing farmland, and crossing into Gaul with bold confidence. You walk with Roman civilians along the roads of Gaul, their carts piled with grain and household relics, their eyes wide with memories they do not wish to recall. These lands, once peaceful provinces dotted with vineyards and villa estates, now echo with alarms. Smoke rises in columns from villages set aflame. Barricades appear at crossroads. Soldiers hurry from one flashpoint to the next, never able to stay long enough to restore the sense of security the world once knew. In the marketplaces of Gaul, you see Roman merchants watching their businesses wither as trade routes collapse. Silver coins lie dull in their hands, devalued, unreliable, barely worth the metal they contain. Yet their greatest fear is not poverty, but the shadow of invasion creeping closer each day. Turn south now toward Italy. Even here, the heartland of the empire, the tremors of the frontier reach the people. Travelers arrive breathless with tales of burning towns. Senators whisper in marbled halls about the swelling dangers at every border. Farmers look nervously toward the northern mountains, wondering if the enemy might one day spill into the very cradle of Rome. And yet the invasions do not end with the Rhine and Danube. Across the endless stretch of the eastern desert beneath the burning sun and shifting sands, another threat rises, one older, disciplined, and steeped in regal ambition. The Sassanid Persian Empire, reborn in strength, marches under the banner of King Shapur Vishnu, whose armies burn with the desire to reclaim ancient glory. Travel with that desert wind across the plains of Mesopotamia, where Roman forts stand like lonely islands in a sea of heat and dust. The air trembles with the hooves of Persian cavalry, swift and deadly. They move like shadows across the sunlit earth, striking Roman camps with fierce precision. Their armored horsemen, glinting like obsidian beneath the harsh light, pierce through Roman lines as though cutting through cloth. Cities such as Nisibis and Carrhae become battlegrounds, their walls struck again and again by war machines and fire. Refugees flee westward, their faces streaked with sand and tears. Roman soldiers, stretched thin across too many frontiers, struggle to hold the line as the Persians push deeper into imperial lands. Here invasion takes on a different form, not the wild charge of tribes from the north, but a calculated storm crafted by a powerful empire. And soon Shapur's victories will echo even more darkly, marking some of the gravest defeats Rome has ever endured. You move now between these three collapsing borders, northwest and east, and feel the empire's breath becoming shallow, strained, desperate. The frontiers that once marked the firm edges of Roman power now resemble frayed ropes, each thread snapping one by one. The legions, once the pride of the world, are exhausted. Some have deserted. Others have turned against the very empire they swore to protect. Many die with their posts, overrun their shields, charred their banners, trampled in the mud. As you walk these broken landscapes, the sights blend together, like scenes in a slow, haunting dream. A farmer kneeling beside the ashes of his burnt home. A soldier clutching a tattered standard against an empty horizon. A mother holding a child while staring at roads filled with refugees. A village where smoke still rises from smoldering beams. A watchtower crumbling in silence beside a river that once defined Rome's power. Everywhere the wind carries the same whispered truth: Rome is vulnerable. Not to one enemy, not to a single army, but to a world pressing in from every direction, seizing the moment when the empire's strength falters. And as invasions strike at borders, civil wars strike at the heart, creating an empire pulled in all directions at once. The soldier emperors fight one another, even as foreign forces carve through Roman lands. No one can be everywhere at once. No one can hold the empire together while every horizon burns. You walk through the smoke of fallen towns, through forests trembling with tension, through deserts glowing with looming threats. And slowly, gently, the realization settles over you like a cloak. The crisis of the 3rd century is not a single event. It is a storm made of countless storms, a night made of many shadows, a collapse made of many fractures. And these fractures are deepening still. The fractured world. The wind shifts as you enter this next chapter, carrying with it the scent of dust and distant fires. The empire you walk through now feels changed, not utterly fallen, but subtly rearranged, like a mosaic whose pieces have loosened and begun to drift apart. The road beneath your feet is the same type the Romans built for centuries, paved with stone worn smooth by generations of travelers. And yet something in the rhythm of the land around you feels unsettled, as though a once steady heartbeat has fallen out of tune. You begin your journey in Gaul, where the fields stretch wide beneath a pale sky. The morning mist hovers low over the vineyards, clinging to wooden posts and curling around the rows of dormant vines. Farmers move quietly through their land, their faces lined with worry. They speak in hushed voices of raids' lost sons and tax collectors who demand coin that no longer holds its value. In a small village near the Rhine, you hear the whisper that has become common across the region: Rome can no longer protect us. It is a dangerous whisper, not shouted, not sung, but breathed from one person to another, like a confession carried by weary souls. And it is from such whispers that new ambitions begin to rise. As you follow the river's bend, you come to the city of Cologne, where a general named Posthumus has taken the purple. His soldiers stand watch along the walls, their armor bright in the midday sun. They are disciplined, well-fed, loyal, a stark contrast to many other legions scattered across the empire's troubled borders. Civilians within the city walk with a steadier step, their markets fuller, their voices more secure. Under Posthumus's leadership, a new order takes shape, calling itself the Gallic Empire. Its lands stretch across Gaul Britannia and parts of Hispania, territories that once took pride in their Roman identity, but now turn toward a new localized authority. Posthumus promises protection, stability, and a return to calm. And in a world where Rome seems distant and fractured, many are willing to accept this new allegiance. Coins bearing his image circulate widely. His administration mirrors the Roman model, complete with senators, priests, and officials. Yet, even here in this moment of relative steadiness, you sense fragility. The Gallic Empire exists because Rome is weakening. It rises not from ambition alone, but from necessity, a shelter built from the debris of a splintering world. From the western provinces you travel eastward, crossing the Alps, where mountain winds howl through narrow passes. Snow clings to jagged peaks and collects in silent drifts on the slopes. You walk along steep paths once bustling with merchants, but now haunted by the footsteps of soldiers shifting from one conflict to another. Many of these men no longer know which emperor they serve. The purple changes too quickly. Loyalty is a flickering flame in a storm. Descending into Italy, you find the heartland uneasy. Rome herself remains magnificent, her temples crowned with marble, her forums filled with statues and shadows. But the city feels hollowed like a grand amphitheater, emptied of its audience. Senators debate, but their voices carry less weight. People gather in taverns, murmuring about emperors they have never seen. Everyone senses that the world is rebalancing, slipping into forms unknown. Even here rumors drift from the east, rumors of a desert city rising with quiet splendor. You follow those rumors until they lead you across the Mediterranean, where warm winds blow across the shores of Syria. Palmyra rises before you like a mirage made real, a city carved from sand and sunlight, adorned with towering colonnades, vast temples and caravan halls echoing with the footsteps of traders. Silk glimmers in market stalls. Frankincense smolders in clay burners. Languages from every corner of the known world mingle in the air like braided threads of a single tapestry. It is here that Queen Zenobia emerges regal and commanding, a woman of intellect, ambition, and fierce determination. Her eyes shine with the confidence of one who believes destiny has chosen her city for a greater role. She rules in the name of her young son, Vabalithus, but all who look upon her know she holds the true reins of power. Under Zenobia, Palmyra blossoms into an empire of its own, the Palmyran Empire, claiming Syria, Arabia, Egypt, and parts of Asia Minor. Her armies march with formidable discipline. Her generals carry banners painted with desert suns and palm fronds. Her scribes record her victories in elegant Aramaic script. She does not declare war on Rome. She simply fills the void where Rome has withdrawn, and the people flock to her banner because she offers stability, dignity, and order in a world drowning in uncertainty. But with each province that shifts its loyalties, the Roman world fractures further. The empire that once encircled the Mediterranean like a single continuous light now flickers in scattered, trembling flames. You move now between these three realms: the central Roman state, the Gallic Empire in the west, and the Palmyrene Empire in the east. Each possesses its own rulers, its own coinage, its own armies patrolling its roads. Three Romes each, claiming legitimacy. Three visions of stability born from the failing unity of the old world. Ordinary people must choose where to place their trust. A merchant carrying olive oil from Hispania wonders which authority will tax him. A farmer near Antioch prays that Zenobia's cavalry will protect his fields from marauders. A soldier in the Balkans wakes each dawn unsure which emperor's name he will be ordered to shout in the next oath. Traveling southward, now you pass through once quiet provinces whose identity has become fluid, stretched thin between competing powers. Some cities switch allegiance more than once in the span of a few years. Coins change faces so rapidly that they feel more like tokens of momentary control than symbols of lasting sovereignty. The fracture extends beyond politics. It reaches into the soul of the empire. Religious rituals evolve in different directions. Cultural influences shift as provinces align with new centers of power. Art and architecture absorb the symbols of emerging authorities. What was once a unified cultural landscape now begins to diverge into regional identities, each shaped by the turbulence of the age. And still the storms do not end. For beyond these human divisions, other pressures tighten their grip. Borders erode, economies weaken, plague lingers like a cold shadow drifting across the land. The empire, split into three, has no single heartbeat to guide it. Its rhythms pulse unevenly, like distant drums in a cavernous hall. As you stand on a hill overlooking the sprawling world below, three realms born from the same ancient nation you feel the weight of this fractured age. The crisis of the 3rd century is no longer merely a political disorder. It is a spiritual rupture, a cultural rupture, a world pulled apart by necessity, grief, and fear. Yet in each fragment, seeds of resilience remain, small sparks glowing against the dark. People adapt, communities rebuild. Hope flickers softly in places where ambition meets courage. And soon new trials will test that hope even further as disease and famine sweep through the scattered empire, leaving fields empty and cities hollow. The plague and the empty fields. You enter this next chapter beneath a muted sky where thin clouds stretch like pale veils across the sun. The air feels heavier now, stiller, as if the land itself is holding its breath. You walk along a rural road in Asia Minor, once alive with the voices of travelers and merchants, but now marked by an uncanny quiet. The wheels of passing carts no longer rumble over the stones. Inns that once welcomed caravans stand shuttered, their courtyards empty. Even the birds seem hesitant to sing. This is the silence that arrives before a different kind of storm, one without armies, banners, or battle cries. A storm made of breath and fever. A storm that does not announce itself with warriors at the gate, but with a single cough in the night. The plague begins softly, as plagues often do. A merchant falls ill in Antioch, trembling with chills one day and burning with fever the next. A child in Alexandria develops strange blotches beneath the skin. A soldier beside the Euphrates coughs blood into the sand. At first, these are small tragedies mourned in quiet homes, but slowly, steadily, the sickness spreads. You walk with villagers as they carry water from a well, their steps weary, their faces etched with worry. They whisper of neighbors who fell ill after touching a sick cow. They speak of travelers collapsing on roadsides. They describe priests who mark doorposts with soot, hoping to ward off unseen forces. And each night more lamps burn in homes where families sit in vigil beside the beds of the dying. In towns and cities the rhythm breaks further. Market squares, once filled with linen stalls and spice sellers, now echo with the hollow sound of wind sweeping across abandoned tables. Public fountains ripple without crowds to gather around them. The baths, those great communal spaces where people once relaxed, argued, gossiped, and dreamed, fall eerily still, their waters left to cool in solitude. You pass through a village in Syria where every house has its shutters drawn. Dust gathers in the streets. A lone dog wanders between doorways, sniffing at the silence. An old man sits by a dry fountain, staring into the distance with vacant eyes. When you greet him, he barely whispers a reply. His voice is brittle. They are gone, he murmurs, all gone. Fields once vibrant with wheat, barley, and olives begin to wither. Farmers grow too weak to tend their crops. Tools lie abandoned near furrows half-plowed. Fruit rots on trees because no one is strong enough to gather the harvest. The land itself begins to feel hollow, as though life has been gently lifted from it. As you move westward, the devastation deepens. The disease spreads through Asia Minor into Greece, then travels across the sea into Italy. Rome, the eternal city, feels the weight of the plague as heavily as any distant province. Streets that once overflowed with life now host processions of funerals. The Tiber carries more funerary barges than cargo vessels. Temples glow at night, with the light of too many offerings, their stone floors streaked with tears and incense ash. You walk beside a Roman physician making his rounds. He carries a satchel filled with herbs, poultices, and charms of protection. His face is lined with exhaustion. He moves from home to home, offering what little comfort his knowledge can bring. Sometimes he whispers prayers to Apollo the healer or to Asclepius, hoping the gods may spare one more life. Other times he simply holds the hands of the dying, giving what comfort he can in a world that feels increasingly fragile. The Emperor Gallienus receives reports from across the empire that read like dirges. Entire cohorts rendered ineffective by illness, grain shipments delayed because harvests have failed, cities half deserted. The plague becomes an invisible enemy, crossing borders with ease, ignoring walls and strategies. It slips beneath doors, clings to travelers' garments, drifts through marketplaces carried by the simplest breath. It becomes impossible to say where the plague ends and famine begins. The empty fields yield little grain. Grain shortages weaken bodies, allowing the sickness to spread more easily. Weakened populations decrease labor, causing further agricultural collapse. A terrible cycle begins, slow and suffocating, a cycle that makes even the toughest soldier tremble more than any barbarian spear. As you walk through the Italian countryside, you see once thriving villas reduced to quiet shells. Gardens filled with statues of nymphs and satyrs have grown wild and tangled. Olive groves stand unpruned, their branches heavy with untended fruit. The aroma of earth and wet leaves fills the cool air, but it is the silence that remains most striking, a silence too deep, a silence that feels unnatural in a land once so full of life. Along the great roads, imperial messengers carry urgent letters, demands for grain, pleas for reinforcements, cries for medical aid. But even their horses move slowly, now weighed down not by cargo, but by the sorrow of messages delivered too late. Travelers who once journeyed from city to city now avoid strangers, covering their faces with cloth, stepping aside at every encounter. You find yourself in a hillside village in Thrace as dusk settles. The setting sun paints the sky with streaks of orange and violet. Smoke curls lazily from a few chimneys. A priest stands in the village square, chanting a prayer for deliverance. Families gather around him, clutching small wax candles that flicker in the evening wind. The priest's voice quivers, not with fear but with exhaustion, the exhaustion of a man who has buried too many of his own flock. Behind the priest, a mural depicting the goddess Fortuna has begun to fade. Her wheel symbol of fate appears worn, its once bright colors weathered by time smoke and the sorrow of those who come before it, seeking answers. People kneel before the image, whispering hopes that the wheel may turn again toward better days. And yet, amid all this darkness, there are moments of quiet resilience. In one field you see a young boy and his grandmother gathering herbs, mint, thyme, and sage to brew medicinal teas. In a deserted marketplace, a single baker continues kneading dough for those who remain. In a quiet courtyard, a small group of musicians play soft melodies on lyres and flutes, believing music might soothe the wounded spirits of their neighbors. Life continues fragile, yet persistent. The plague, for all its devastation, cannot extinguish the small lights that flicker in the hearts of those who endure. These lights glow like distant stars in a cold night, faint, scattered, but present. As night falls across the empire, you stand on a hill overlooking miles of darkened land. Fires burn in scattered clusters, each a reminder of a family gathered close fighting to survive another day. The fields lie quiet, the villages still, the roads empty. The wind rustles through tall grasses, whispering stories of loss and perseverance. The crisis of the 3rd century is no longer a purely military catastrophe. It has become a deeply human one, unfolding in kitchens, fields, and sickbeds. And in the wake of the plague, another crisis begins to grow, one that strikes at the heartbeat of Roman order, the collapse of the empire's economy. The collapse of the economy. You step gently into this next chapter, beneath a muted afternoon sky where the sunlight falls thinly across the land, as though filtered through a veil of dust. The empire feels quieter than before the fields hollowed by plague, the roads less traveled, and the great rhythm of Roman commerce slowed to a weary, uneven pulse. What you are about to witness is not a single collapse, but many small collapses, each one subtle, spreading outward like cracks across the surface of an ancient vase. You begin your journey in a once thriving marketplace in northern Italy. Here, beneath weathered porticos, merchants once shouted prices for olives, figs, salted fish, and fine wool. The air used to be thick with the aroma of spices carried from distant eastern caravans, and the sharp tang of fresh wine poured from clay amphorae. Today, however, the marketplace lies strangely subdued. Stalls stand empty. A few lonely traders sit on crates, their merchandise thin and meager. You approach a coin seller, an elderly man hunched beside a small wooden table. Before him lies a scattered collection of Roman coins, some bright, others tarnished, many clipped or scraped, as if each generation has taken something from them. He picks up a denarius and holds it to the fading light. "Silver," he mutters, turning it over with trembling fingers. Once it meant trust. He then lets the coin fall lightly to the table, where it makes a dull, unimpressive sound. The economy of Rome, once the envy of the known world, begins to collapse, not with a sudden crash, but with a soft erosion. As the empire weakens, so does the value of its currency. Emperors struggling to pay their armies debase the coins, mixing silver with copper, until the once reliable denarius becomes a pale imitation of itself. People lose confidence. Prices rise, markets contract, and trust, the invisible foundation of all trade, begins to crumble. You continue walking through the marketplace, noticing the sense of unease lingering in the air. Farmers who once traveled days to sell their produce now hesitate to make the journey, unsure if the coins they receive will hold any value by the time they return home. Craftsmen complain that raw materials have grown scarce and expensive. Fishermen return from the coast with empty nets, not because the sea is barren, but because the cost of repairing their boats has become too high. Trade routes, once bustling with caravans and merchant ships, have thinned dramatically. The roads, still impressive underfoot, feel strangely quiet. Imagine walking along the Via Appia, that proud artery of the empire, where once you might have shared the path with travelers from every corner of the Mediterranean. Now your footsteps echo between long stretches of empty landscape. Inns stand half abandoned, bridges creak beneath disrepair. The great machine of Roman commerce stutters. As you move eastward, crossing into the provinces of the Balkans, the signs of economic collapse deepen. Here, war and invasion have disrupted entire regions. Vineyards lie untended, orchards rot with unpicked fruit. Mines that once yielded precious metals now stand silent, their tunnels abandon their workers, dispersed or dead. In a small mining town near Moesia, you meet a group of exhausted laborers gathered around a dying fire. Their voices are low, their clothes worn thin by hardship. Once these mines supplied the empire with silver and iron, the lifeblood of both currency and warfare. Now the miners speak of tunnels, collapsing tools, breaking wages disappearing. Without metals, the empire cannot mint reliable coins. Without coins, it cannot pay soldiers. And without soldiers, it cannot hold the frontiers. The collapse deepens. You follow the Danube southward through lands scarred by repeated raids. Entire towns have been deserted. The economy is not merely weakened, it has been violently severed from the world it once sustained. Farmers hide their grain from tax collectors, fearful that the state will take what little they have left. Some villages revert to barter trading wool for salt grain, for tools, meat, for pottery. A system that once connected thousands of miles under a single imperial economy now shrinks to the scale of small, isolated communities. In a remote village in Thrace, you watch a potter knead clay beside a crackling hearth. His hands are steady, but his shelves are nearly empty. He explains that the merchants who once bought his wares no longer come. Their ships have stopped sailing. Their coins are worthless. His craft, once respected and profitable, now survives on small exchanges: a jug for a sack of barley, a bowl for a handful of herbs. As he speaks, you hear the quiet despair hidden beneath his words. A world that once felt vast and interconnected has become small, fragile, and uncertain. You continue west toward the heart of the empire. Even Rome itself, the city of 7 hills crowned with marble temples and lit by the glow of thousands of lamps, cannot escape the economic decline. The great ports along the Tiber show fewer ships than ever before. Warehouses once filled with grain from Egypt now echo with emptiness. Bread shortages stir unrest. Lines grow longer outside bakeries. Prices rise like a slow, relentless tide. In the Forum, you see money changers weighing coins with suspicious eyes, as though each denarius is a potential betrayal. Traders squabble over prices. Senators debate in concerned tones, though their power to influence the crisis has faded. The economy, like the empire itself, has become a creature wounded in too many places at once. But the collapse is not only about coinage or trade, it is also about confidence, the confidence that Rome could forever sustain the world that depended on it. As that confidence erodes, people adapt in quiet, desperate ways. Farmers grow only enough for their families. Merchants hoard goods instead of selling them. Wealthy families retreat to fortified estates, focusing on survival rather than commerce. And slowly, a deep transformation begins to take hold. Rome, once defined by its urban might, starts shifting toward a more rural, localized mode of life, a precursor to the world that will one day become medieval Europe. Large estates become self-sufficient. City populations shrink. The empire's identity, long shaped by bustling markets and sophisticated trade networks, begins to reshape itself around smaller communities that rely on their own resources. It is a subtle transformation, unfolding like shadows stretching across a field at dusk. You may not see it all at once, but you feel it in each village, each abandoned workshop, each hollowed marketplace. The economy's collapse is not merely a financial failure, it is a reordering of society. Yet even in the midst of this turmoil, beneath the ash and uncertainty, something else stirs: a cultural resilience, a spiritual turning inward. People seek meaning in new ways. They look to temples, to rituals, to philosophies, and to emerging faiths for comfort and guidance. And so, as the economic world falters, another realm, the realm of belief, begins to glow more brightly. The spirit of Rome. You enter this next chapter as dusk settles gently across the empire, a soft violet-blue veil draped over fields, mountains, and silent streets. The outward world feels fragile, now weakened by invasion plague, and the slow collapse of the economy. But beneath these troubles, another realm stirs, a realm of belief, memory, ritual, and identity. This is the inner Rome, the Rome that breathes through temples, hearths, and whispered prayers. And even when the empire bends under the weight of crisis, this spirit endures. You begin your journey in a quiet courtyard in the city of Rome. The sun has dipped below the rooftops, and the first lamps flicker into life, casting warm pools of light across stone pathways. A family gathers before a small household shrine, the Laurarium. Incense curls upward in a thin, fragrant ribbon. The mother places a wreath of fresh herbs before tiny clay figures of the household gods, the Lares and Penates, while the father murmurs a simple prayer for protection through the dangerous night. Their ritual is small, private, humble, yet it reflects something profound. Even when the world outside trembles, the Romans hold tightly to the ancient rhythms of home and hearth. This is how the spirit of the empire survives through countless small acts of devotion, carried out quietly in kitchens and courtyards. Travel with the evening breeze through the narrow streets of Rome, where temples rise like islands of flickering firelight. The Temple of Vesta glows warmly, its sacred flame tended by the Vestal Virgins. The air smells faintly of olive oil and burning cedar. Pilgrims kneel at the threshold offering prayers for stability, for healing, for a return to the order that once defined their world. Nearby, at the great temple of Jupiter Optimus, Maximus priests in white robes chant hymns that echo across the hill. Their voices rise with solemn cadence, blending with the soft ringing of bronze instruments. Torches illuminate the vast columns, casting long shadows that dance like ancient spirits along the marble steps. Here, surrounded by ritual, you sense something ancient and enduring. Rome's gods, Jupiter, Venus, Mars, Minerva, have witnessed centuries of triumph and hardship. Their stories flow through murals, mosaics, and carved altars. Even now, in an age of chaos, people seek comfort in these old divine presences, believing that Rome's destiny is bound to them. And yet the spiritual world of the empire is not fixed. It shifts, adapts, and blends with the cultures Rome once conquered. Travel now into the eastern provinces, where religions mingle like merging rivers. In Alexandria, the cool night air drifts along the harbor as lanterns sway from the masts of anchored ships. You wander into the Serapeum, a magnificent temple complex dedicated to Serapis, a god born from the fusion of Greek and Egyptian traditions. Worshippers gather in tiled courtyards, their chants echoing off walls adorned with carved lions and sacred ibis birds. A priest raises a bowl of perfumed oil, its scent drifting toward the stars. Here belief feels fluid and luminous, shaped by centuries of cultural blending. To the north, in the bustling cities of Asia Minor, followers of Cybele, the Great Mother, dance beside bonfires. Their rituals pulse with drums and flutes, their bodies moving in rhythms that feel both ancient and timeless. In the Persian-influenced regions of Syria and Cappadocia, devotees of Mithras descend into underground chambers, their ceremonies lit by flickering torches, reflecting off painted walls that depict cosmic battles and sacred bulls. Travel even farther, and you hear a new kind of prayer rising quietly from modest homes, marketplaces, and workshops. In the fading years of the 3rd century, Christianity, still small, still persecuted at times, slowly gathers followers. In dimly lit rooms beneath city streets, communities gather gently around simple tables. They share bread and wine, recite teachings of compassion, and speak of hope that transcends the crumbling world around them. Their voices remain soft, their gatherings discreet. Yet their faith brings comfort to those who feel abandoned by the collapsing structures of politics and economy. Even those who do not join these groups feel the shift in emerging spiritual hunger that stretches across the empire. Continue now into the countryside. As night deepens, you find yourself standing beside a rural shrine near a forest edge, nothing more than a wooden post carved with a rustic image of a local deity. The people of the village leave offerings of breadfruit and woven flowers. Their beliefs blend Rome with older traditions, the legacies of ancestors who lived on the land long before Roman rule. You sense the quiet dignity in their gestures, the way faith ties them to their homes, their fields, their ancestors. Everywhere you travel, from the grand temples of the capital to the humblest village shrines, one truth becomes clear. The heart of Rome is not only marble law or legions. It is the spirit carried in the hearts of its people. This spirit can falter, but it does not break. Walk now into the dim halls of a small library in Antioch. Candles flicker along shelves of scrolls containing the philosophies of Epictetus, Seneca, Marcus Aurelius. A scholar sits hunched over a parchment, copying lines that speak of endurance virtue and the calm acceptance of fate. Stoicism, with its quiet strength, becomes a refuge in these troubled times. In another corner, a group of Neoplatonist philosophers debate the nature of the soul, the divine, and the order of the cosmos. Their conversations flow like gentle streams, even as chaos rages outside. Ideas, too, are part of Rome's enduring spirit ideas that offer meaning when the material world tumbles. Religion, philosophy, tradition, identity. These threads weave together, forming a tapestry stronger than any coin or soldier's oath. They create continuity in an age when emperors rise and fall like waves on troubled waters. As night deepens across the empire, you stand on a hill overlooking the darkened landscape. Small points of firelight glow across the plains from household shrines. Roadside altars, temple courtyards, and quiet gatherings of scholars and believers. The empire may be fractured, weakened, and shaken, but its spirit still flickers across every province, carried in prayer, ritual, and memory. And soon from this spiritual endurance, a new kind of strength will emerge, embodied in the figure of a powerful, determined emperor who will fight to restore unity. His name is Aurelian. His rise will mark the beginning of Rome's long, difficult road back from the brink. Aurelian, restorer of the world. You enter this next chapter beneath a pale wintry dawn that spreads softly across the Balkan Mountains. Frost clings to the grass like tiny shards of glass. The world feels quiet, stripped bare, as though the empire itself is holding its breath, waiting for a figure strong enough to gather its scattered pieces. In this cold hour, you hear the distant rhythmic thunder of marching feet. Slowly, a column of soldiers emerges from the mist, their armor glinting faintly in the thin light. At their head rides a man whose posture radiates purpose, Aurelian. Tall, broad-shouldered, and forged by a lifetime of frontier conflict, he carries himself with an intensity that commands respect without demanding it. His eyes are sharp, scanning every ridge and valley as though measuring their strength. His jaw is set, not in anger, but in determination, the expression of someone who has known hardship and has learned to rise again and again. This is the man who will try to restore the world. Aurelian ascends the throne in 270 AD, inheriting an empire broken in three. In the west, the Gallic Empire controls Gaul Britannia and parts of Hispania. In the east, Zenobia's Palmyrene Empire reigns over Syria, Egypt, and Asia Minor. The central Roman state is battered, beleaguered, and haunted by the ghosts of countless fallen emperors. Yet Aurelian does not flinch. He surveys the fractured world as a blacksmith surveys shattered iron, not with despair, but with the quiet resolve to repair what is broken. Your journey with him begins on the Danube frontier, where barbarian invasions still press fiercely against Rome's failing borders. The air is sharp with the scent of pine and smoke. Snow crunches beneath the boots of weary legionaries. Fires crackle in makeshift encampments, sending sparks spiraling into the dawn. Aurelian rides among the soldiers, speaking with them, directly hearing their worries, sharing their rations. He reminds them of the Rome they once believed in. Even in these bleak landscapes, you sense how his presence steadies their spirits. It is here that he first proves his mettle. The Goths, Vandals, and Juthungi cross the borders in sweeping raids, but Aurelian meets them with the speed and ferocity of a storm wind. You watch as Roman cavalry charges across frozen fields, hooves pounding like war drums. The air fills with the roar of soldiers, the clash of iron, the sharp whistle of arrows slicing the winter sky. Aurelian rides at the front, fearless, his cloak whipping behind him as he drives back the invaders. Time and again he wins. Time and again he pushes the enemy back. And with each victory, the empire's pulse grows stronger. But frontier battles are only the first step. Aurelian knows the empire cannot survive in fragments. Rome must be one or nothing. And so, with the northern borders stabilized, he turns his gaze westward. Your journey now carries you across the snow-dusted Alps, descending into the fertile lands of northern Italy. As you enter the wide plains near the Po River, news spreads like a warming breeze. Aurelian is marching against the Gallic Empire. The people whisper with anticipation, hope, mixing with fear. They have seen many emperors pass through these roads, but none with Aurelian's presence, a presence that feels like iron brought to life. You cross the Rhone, passing towns that bear the scars of long neglect. Fields lie fallow, roads crumble, forts stand half abandoned. Yet as Aurelian advances, a new energy stirs. Legionaries march with renewed vigor. Standard-bearers lift the Roman eagle with pride. And in the distance, the Gallic Emperor Tetricus senses the tightening of fate. The final confrontation comes swiftly. You stand on a wide open plain outside Chalons, where morning mist drifts across the grass like thin smoke. Aurelian's legions array themselves in disciplined ranks. Across the field, the Gallic army forms its own lines, proud, yet weary from years of isolation and internal strife. The silence before battle feels thick enough to touch. And then the clash. The roar of armies shatters the stillness. Shields lock, spears thrust. Cavalry circles the fray like hawks hunting through fog. Aurelian commands with precision, directing his troops with calm authority. The Roman lines advance steady as a rising tide, and the Gallic resistance begins to falter. By midday, the battle is decided. Soon after, the Gallic Empire dissolves. Tetricus surrenders, and Aurelian, rather than punishing him, shows a mercy that surprises even his own advisors. He spares the defeated ruler and later appoints him to govern in Italy, a gesture that speaks to Aurelian's deeper vision: restoration, not vengeance. The West is whole again, but the East still waits. And so you travel with Aurelian across the Mediterranean, the sea shimmering beneath a bright sky. The winds guide the ships toward Alexandria first, where Zenobia's Palmyrene forces still hold Egypt. The city rises before you, golden in the sunlight, its great lighthouse piercing the sky like a blade of pure brightness. Grain ships that once fed Rome now sit idle in its harbors. The city's pride stands tall, but Aurelian's resolve stands taller. Battles flare across the desert. Sandstorms whip the battlefield into chaos. The sun scorches armor and skin alike. Yet Aurelian drives forward, reclaiming Egypt's breadbasket and securing the empire's most vital lifeline. Then he marches north toward the jewel of the East, Palmyra. You see the city as it appears in the shimmering heat, tall colonnades stretching into the horizon, temples crowned with golden carvings, streets paved with pale limestone that glows beneath the desert sun. Zenobia, regal and relentless, stands at the forefront of her army. Her resolve is fierce, her pride unbroken. The people adore her, but they know Rome is coming. The clash is monumental. Roman legions and Palmyrene cavalry collide like thunder rolling across the sands. Dust rises in clouds, spears flash, war cries echo between the distant hills. Aurelian presses forward with unstoppable momentum, his forces gradually overwhelming Palmyra's defenders. Zenobia flees on camelback toward the Euphrates, but is captured before reaching safety. Palmyra submits. The East returns to Roman rule. In a single campaign, Aurelian has made the empire whole again, West restored, East reclaimed, North defended. The Senate grants him a title rarely given, a title earned by will strength and vision, Restitutor Orbis, restorer of the world. And for a brief moment, beneath the warm glow of a late summer sun, the empire breathes deeply, as though waking from a long fever. People speak his name with reverence. Merchants return to the roads. Farmers sow their fields again. Temples ring with hymns of gratitude. Yet even in triumph, Aurelian knows the empire's wounds run deep. And soon one final task will call to him, a task that reaches into the very heart of Rome itself. For a city no longer secure will soon learn the comfort of walls rising to meet the horizon. The walls of Rome. You enter this next chapter beneath a warm late afternoon light, the kind that casts long, gentle shadows across the hills surrounding the eternal city. Cicadas hum softly in the grass. A breeze moves through the cypress trees, carrying with it the faint scent of dust stone and ripening figs. From a distance, Rome glows domes and temples, catching the sun as though holding its rays in their marble embrace. And yet, as you draw closer, you sense something different in the air. Not fear exactly, nor panic, but a quiet awareness of vulnerability, like the moment a person realizes the house they've lived in all their life has grown old enough to need new foundations. Rome, the city that once felt untouchable, now feels exposed. After decades of invasion, rebellion, plague, and economic collapse, even the eternal city has learned that eternity requires more than faith, it requires protection. So, in the early years of his reign after reuniting the fractured empire, Aurelian turns his attention not to conquest, but to preservation. And thus begins one of the most extraordinary undertakings of the crisis, the building of the Aurelian walls. Walk with him now through the streets of Rome. The city hums with the noise of labor, the scrape of chisels against tufa stone, the creak of wagons transporting bricks, the steady beat of hammers shaping mortar. Towering scaffolds wrap around half-finished battlements. Work crews of soldiers, laborers, and craftsmen move like an enormous coordinated organism, their sweat blending with dust beneath the cool twilight breeze. Aurelian walks among them, his cloak stirring softly around his armor. He studies the height of the walls, the thickness of the towers, the angles of the battlements. Under his command, the city girds itself with fortifications stretching nearly 19 kilometers around its expanding neighborhoods. Rome, for the first time in centuries, is enclosing itself. For generations, Romans believed their city needed no walls. Why build a barrier when the empire itself was the wall? Why fear outsiders when Roman legions stood like guardians on every frontier? But those frontiers had cracked. The impossible had nearly happened. And Aurelian, practical and unromantic, understood that even the heart must protect itself when the arteries grow weak. You walk along the rising walls beside him. The stones glow warm in the late sun. Dust swirls around your feet as masons climb ladders with baskets of brick. Children gather to watch, their eyes wide with fascination. Some elders mutter that it feels unsettling to wall in a city that once ordered the world. But most Romans watch with quiet relief. They have lived through too many years of rumor and invasion. A wall, even one so late in coming, feels like a promise. Aurelian stops occasionally to speak with his officers. He is deliberate, focused, aware that this structure is not a symbol of weakness, but a necessity born from the lessons of crisis. He orders the walls to be tall, nearly 20 feet in many places, strong enough to withstand sieges, fast enough to be completed by using whatever materials can be found. In some districts, ancient monuments, unused tombs, and older walls are incorporated directly into the new line. Pragmatism guides the work more than aesthetic design, and yet even in their practicality the walls feel monumental. Continue walking with the emperor to the southern edge of the city. Here, where the land rises gently, you see the massive gates taking shape: Porta Appia, Porta San Paolo, Porta Asinaria, each one destined to become a guardian of the lives inside. Workers smooth the stone-carved channels for wooden doors and prepare iron hinges that will one day groan as carts and travelers pass through. Beyond the walls, the Campagna stretches in golden waves. Farmers move slowly across the fields, harvesting late summer crops. Sunset paints the horizon in warm shades of orange and red. Every detail feels calm, reassuring, and yet you feel the urgency behind this construction, a sense that the city is racing a clock whose hands are invisible. As night deepens, torches burn along the construction line. The walls must rise. The walls must be finished. The walls must protect. You leave the city gates now and climb the gentle slope of the Aventine Hill. From here you look down at Rome, illuminated by torchlight temples, glowing like islands of fire insula, crowded with flickering oil lamps, bathhouses, sending up gentle curls of steam into the night sky. And encircling it all, the incomplete ring of the new walls stretches across the land like a stone horizon drawn around the city's heart. The sight is moving and humbling. Rome, the capital of a once limitless world, now shelters itself like any vulnerable town. But it is not shame that fills the air. It is acceptance. It is resilience. It is the determination of a city that refuses to fall. At dawn, you descend once more into the city streets. Rome continues its ancient rhythms: bakers loading warm bread into clay ovens, vendors arranging baskets of figs and olives, scribes unrolling scrolls in tiny shops scented with ink and papyrus. But interwoven with these rhythms is the sound of construction, the tempo of a new future. Children walk to school beneath the rising battlements. Priests lead processions through arches that will soon become fortified gates. Merchants carry their goods under scaffolds that cast latticework shadows on the road. Life goes on, but it goes on protected. And Aurelian, now deep into his mission, feels the empire strengthening, not just militarily, but spiritually. For the first time in decades, people speak of security again. Traders tentatively return to roads. Farmers begin to sow more confidently. Soldiers stationed within the city feel a renewed sense of purpose. The walls are not perfect, but they are a promise that Rome will endure no matter what storms gather beyond them. And storms do gather. Even as the walls rise, new threats loom across the horizon. Conspiracies whisper in the corners of power. Rivals emerge uncertain and ambitious. The emperor who has restored the world must still walk carefully through a landscape shaped by betrayal and unrest. Aurelian's story will not end with the walls of Rome, but these walls will outlive him, standing for centuries, watching dynasties rise and fall, witnessing the transformation of the world. For now, the city sleeps safer than it has in years. The night wind brushes the new stone. Torches flicker along the parapets. Rome, wounded yet unbroken, prepares for what comes next. The fragile reprieve. Night settles over the empire once more, a calm veil strewn with soft stars. The worst of the chaos feels distant now, as though the storms of the last decades have finally begun to drift away over the far horizon. You walk along a quiet Roman road, the stones still warm from the day's sun, and you feel almost for the first time in this long journey a sense of exhale, a faint release of tension, like shoulders slowly relaxing after years of strain. Aurelian's victories have brought Rome back from the brink. The barbarians have been repelled. The Gallic and Palmyrene empires have been reunited with the Roman heart. The walls of Rome now rise like guardians around the eternal city. For a moment it seems that the empire might reclaim its former rhythm, and yet as you walk, you feel something fragile beneath your feet, like thin ice covering deep, unseen waters. Aurelian's Rome is stronger, yes, but it is strength that trembles ever so slightly at the edges. The empire is not fully healed. It is merely breathing more steadily. The wounds of the crisis still ache in hidden ways. You approach a small village in Etruria as twilight deepens. The houses glow with lamplight. Families tend evening meals over open hearths. The scent of herbs and simmering lentils drifts into the air. Children chase each other between olive trees, their laughter soft against the chirping of crickets. And yet when the conversation of adults drifts outward, you hear the shadows behind their words. Will the grain shipments arrive this year? They say raiders cross the Danube again. Did you hear what happened to the garrison at Sirmium? Even in peace, fear has become a habit, one the empire cannot easily unlearn. Your path leads you onward south toward Rome. Along the way you pass travelers bearing their own quiet burdens. A merchant pushing a wagon of cloth goods mutters about the unpredictable value of coinage. A soldier on leave speaks of comrades lost not to war, but to hunger and sickness. A priest of Jupiter walks barefoot on a pilgrimage, praying for stable seasons and calm harvests. They all move through a world still haunted by memories of collapse. As you reach the outskirts of Rome, the walls rise before you immense and solemn in the evening light. Soldiers patrol the ramparts. Torches flicker along the battlements like a crown of living fire. Inside the city, life has returned. Marketplaces bustle again. Workshops ring with the sound of hammers. The Tiber carries small cargo boats along its calm waters. But beneath this renewed vitality lies a quiet vulnerability. Aurelian knows this. He feels it in every report he reads, every messenger he receives. The empire stands once more, but only just. It needs time. It needs stability. Above all, it needs leadership that can endure. And yet, fate, always unpredictable, has its own designs. Walk now into the Palatine Hill, where the imperial palace stands in dim lamplight. Its marble floors gleam, its gardens scented with night-blooming flowers. But its corridors are tense, filled with whispers and glances that carry a hint of unease. Aurelian, ever hard-working, spends long hours reviewing troop movements, grain shortages, and the urgent repairs needed across provinces still scarred by decades of conflict. He is a man trying to hold together a world made fragile by too many storms. But the more he restores, the more he centralizes power, and the more he draws the wary eyes of those who fear his growing strength. Conspiracies breed in the shadows. Old rivalries fester. Men who depend on chaos for their own ambitions sense that time is running short. You rise before dawn one morning and walk along a lonely stretch of road near Byzantium, where Aurelian has traveled to prepare a campaign against Persia. The air is sharp with coastal winds. The sky glimmers faintly with the first hints of sunrise. Aurelian rides along the road with a small retinue, speaking quietly with his officers. His voice is steady. His plans are clear. But among those in his entourage is a man harboring fear, or perhaps greed, one who has heard rumors that Aurelian intends to punish corruption harshly, perhaps even execute those who have stolen from the treasury. Whispers spread that the emperor has drawn up a list of names. Whether these rumors are true or false does not matter. Fear alone is enough. And so, in a moment of treachery, the fragile Reprieve fractures. Aurelian is ambushed by those sworn to protect him. Blades flash beneath the pale morning light. Shouts pierce the silence, and the man who restored the world falls to the dirt road, his blood soaking into the cold earth. There is no grand battle, no heroic farewell, only the cruel suddenness of betrayal. News travels swiftly and strangely. Some do not believe it at first. Others feel the ground shift beneath their feet, knowing how many emperors the crisis has already consumed. The empire had finally begun to stabilize under a man strong enough to hold its many pieces. His death feels like a cruel reminder of how delicate that stability truly was. You return now to Rome, where confusion ripples through the Senate, the army, and the people. Who will lead the empire next? Who can carry Aurelian's mantle? Who can keep the provinces united? For several weeks the empire teeters once more. The armies, fearful of descending back into the chaos of rapid succession, hesitate to choose a new leader too quickly. And then, in a rare moment of clarity, the Senate names Tacitus emperor, not the historian known to earlier ages, but a seasoned elder statesman, thoughtful and restrained. His reign is brief but steady, like a gentle hand placed upon a shaking table. He attempts to continue Aurelian's policies. He tries to keep the frontiers strong, but time moves differently now, power shifts quickly, and the Reprieve remains fragile. Tacitus dies, Probus rises, then Carus, then Carinus, then Numerian. Each emperor rules only for a short flicker of time before being swept away by fate, conspiracy, or battlefield accidents. Yet, despite this rapid succession, something remarkable happens. The empire does not fall again. Aurelian's reforms, the reconsolidation of territory, and the renewed strength of the legions have built a foundation, thin, but real strong enough to keep Rome standing through these brief reigns. The great fractures do not reopen. The provinces do not break away. The borders do not collapse all at once. It is as though Aurelian left behind a scaffolding strong enough to hold the structure until a true builder could arrive. And soon, from the distant lands of Illyria, a man will rise who understands that the empire cannot survive another collapse. a man who will reshape Rome itself, piece by piece, until it becomes something new, more resilient, more structured, more enduring. His name is Diocletian, and his rise will mark the beginning of the end, not of Rome, but of Rome as it once was. The rise of Diocletian. You begin this chapter in the soft stillness before dawn, standing on a wind-swept plain near the Adriatic coast. The sky above glows faintly with the first suggestion of light, a thin silver band stretching across the horizon. The air is cool and clean, carrying the scent of wet earth and distant pine forests. Somewhere nearby, a small military camp stirs awake. You hear the soft clank of armor, the murmur of low voices, the rhythmic beat of soldiers preparing themselves for another uncertain day. This is the world into which Diocletian rises, a world exhausted by decades of crisis, held together by the fragile threads left by Aurelian and those who came after him. A world waits for stability, the way parched ground waits for rain. You walk among the soldiers as the camp slowly brightens with dawn. These are Illyrian troops, tough, resilient, born from a land of rugged hills and cold winters. They are men who understand hardship without complaint, men whose loyalty must be earned, not demanded. From their ranks Diocletian emerged, rising step by determined step, until he became commander of the imperial guard. He is here now, standing near a smoldering fire, reviewing messages brought by tired couriers. Tall, composed, and observant, he carries himself with a calm authority that draws the eye without effort. His posture is steady, his movements deliberate. And though his voice is quiet, every soldier who hears him stands a little straighter, as if guided by the gravity of his presence. His moment comes soon. The Emperor Numerian, weary and weakened, dies under mysterious circumstances during a long campaign in the East. Suspicion spreads like smoke through the ranks. Accusations coil through the tents like serpents seeking shadows. No one knows who can be trusted. No one knows how the army will choose its next leader. Then, in a solemn gathering beneath the rising sun, the legions call out the name of the man they trust most, Diocletian. You witness the moment as it unfolds with the grace of ritual. Soldiers raise their shields, their voices rising in deep unison. Diocletian steps forward, his expression calm yet resolute. He draws his sword, lifts it to the sky, and swears an oath to restore order, justice, and dignity to the Roman Empire. The cold steel catches the morning light, reflecting it like a shard of dawn itself. He does not inherit a stable throne. He inherits a wounded world. And quietly he begins the work of healing it. Your journey with him turns westward, now following the roads that lead toward Italy. Along the way, you witness an empire still flickering between anguish and survival. Villages stand half abandoned. Fields grow wild from years of neglect. Forts lie in ruins, their walls crumbling beneath creeping vines. The people, though grateful for every whisper of peace, remain wary, like animals emerging from a long winter, unsure whether the snow has truly melted. Diocletian moves with careful precision. He does not rush to impose sweeping changes. Instead, he first strengthens the core, consolidating his power, securing loyalty from the legions, and confronting rival claimants. Carinus, the last obstacle to his uncontested rule, falls in battle, leaving Diocletian the sole emperor of a fractured and weary world. From this singular moment of unity, his vision begins to unfold. You reach Nicomedia, the city that will become Diocletian's chosen eastern capital. It rests along the edge of the sea like a polished gem, its harbor filled with merchant ships, its hills crowned with temples and villas softened by sea breezes. It is here that Diocletian contemplates the troubles of the empire with a mind as disciplined as a seasoned general's hand. He walks through the colonnades of his palace, the air scented with myrtle and warm stone. He pauses to speak with advisors, scholars, and governors. He listens, he observes. He measures every problem not only by its immediate impact, but by its deeper root. He realizes the truth that many before him sensed but could not articulate. No single man can rule an empire this vast, this wounded, and this complex. The challenges are too many: barbarian invasions, economic collapse, rebellions, administrative corruption, a population worn thin by decades of fear. And so, with a mind both daring and deeply pragmatic, Diocletian begins to reshape Rome, not as it once was, but as it must now become. You witness his decision unfold like a quiet revelation. The empire will be divided not in spirit, but in governance. Diocletian appoints his trusted friend Maximian as co-emperor, granting him authority over the western provinces, while he himself governs the east. Together they stand like twin pillars, supporting a burden too heavy for one alone. This is the beginning of the Tetrarchy, a system so bold and unprecedented that even Rome's oldest statesmen struggle to comprehend it. In time, 2 more rulers are added, junior emperors, Caesars, skilled generals who will share command and ensure smooth succession. The empire is no longer the domain of a singular ruler, but a carefully organized hierarchy of power, each part supporting the other. You travel between these divided regions, and you feel the shift almost immediately. In Gaul, Maximian stabilizes the frontiers. In Egypt, Diocletian restores order with firm, unyielding resolve. Across the Danube, new fortifications rise. Administrative reforms take shape, reorganizing provinces' tax systems and military structures. You walk through workshops where new mints strike coins with consistent weight and quality. You pass through rural districts where census officials catalog populations that had been invisible for years. You stand near military camps where soldiers drill with renewed discipline under better supplied commands. A sense of structure returns, slow, steady, like the rebuilding of a city brick by brick. And yet, amid these sweeping reforms, Diocletian remains a man of simple habits. In the evening, you find him walking through the gardens of his palace, breathing in the scent of laurel leaves and night blossoms. He pauses by a fountain whose waters ripple softly beneath the moonlight. He looks not like an emperor surrounded by luxury, but like a thoughtful guardian contemplating the fragile world entrusted to him. He knows the work is far from finished. He knows the old Rome is fading. He knows a new order must rise in its place. As night deepens across the empire, you stand beside him, watching the reflection of the moon shimmer across quiet waters. The world is changing not through violence, not through collapse, but through careful hands shaping something resilient from the remnants of crisis. Soon those hands will reshape not just governance, but every thread of the empire's life, its economy, its borders, its administrative machinery. Diocletian has risen. Now he will begin the work of reforging Rome, the reforged empire. You begin this part beneath a pale morning sky, walking along the quiet shoreline near Nicomedia. Gentle waves slip over smooth stones, whispering with the soft persistence of breath. The horizon glows faintly, the sun rising through delicate veils of mist. And behind you on a promontory overlooking the calm sea stands the palace of Diocletian, a testament not to luxury, but to order, structure, and the promise of renewal. The crisis of the 3rd century has left the empire scarred but standing. Now, under Diocletian's careful guidance, the long work of reforging begins not with grand speeches or dramatic gestures, but with steady, deliberate reforms that touch every layer of Roman life. You walk with him through a colonnaded hall where early sunlight spills across polished stone. His advisors stand beside scrolls marked with figures, maps, and census tallies. Diocletian moves among them like a craftsman, inspecting each tool before shaping the final form. His eyes, thoughtful and sharp, see the empire not as a monolithic whole, but as a vast and delicate machine, one whose gears must be realigned, cleaned, and strengthened if it is to run again. Your journey takes you first to the military, the backbone of Rome's power. Decades of civil war have weakened the legions, pulling them in too many directions. Diocletian addresses this not by shrinking the army, but by expanding and reorganizing it. New frontier units rise along the Danube and the Rhine, their camps fortified with stronger walls and deeper trenches. Mobile field armies are formed farther inland, ready to rush wherever danger appears. You watch soldiers drilling beneath an open sky, their movements synchronized, their formations tight. The sound of shields locking sandals, pounding on packed earth, and officers calling commands echoes with renewed confidence. The empire is no longer defending the frontiers with scattered remnants. It is preparing for threats with measured discipline. Yet military strength alone cannot stabilize Rome. The empire needs structural foundations built on clarity and order. And so Diocletian turns to administration. You travel with him between provinces as he divides the empire into smaller, more manageable units. Governors who once controlled vast territories now oversee more limited regions, allowing them to govern more carefully. Taxation is reorganized with unprecedented precision. Census officials venture into towns, villages, and remote farmsteads, recording populations, livestock, and crop yields. Bureaucracy grows sometimes clumsily, sometimes burdensomely, but always with the intent of ensuring that the state knows its own shape. You pause in a dusty provincial town where a magistrate carefully inspects ledger sheets marked with neat lines of ink. Beside him, farmers wait with baskets of grain payment for the taxes assessed by the new system. It is not easy. It is not always welcomed. But slowly the economy begins to shift away from chaos and toward the steady rhythm of accountability. Coins begin to stabilize under Diocletian's new monetary reforms. Mints produce pieces of more consistent weight and purity. Traders inspect the coins with cautious approval, feeling the faint return of trust. Markets begin to revive. Grain shipments become more predictable. Roads long neglected receive repairs from new teams of laborers dispatched by imperial order. You continue onward, moving through bustling urban centers and quiet rural expanses. Everywhere you see signs of gradual renewal, rebuilt fortifications, reopened workshops, revitalized ports where ships once again load cargo bound for distant provinces. The great arteries of Roman commerce begin to pulse with life. And yet Diocletian does not stop there. He knows that Rome's identity is also shaped by its spiritual currents. The 3rd century has seen religious diversity flourish: old gods, new gods, philosophies, mystery cults, and a growing Christian presence. In this shifting landscape, the emperor seeks unity through the old traditions. He encourages the worship of Jupiter, the chief of the gods, as a symbol of imperial order. Temples are repaired, rituals revived, state ceremonies performed with renewed splendor. You stand in the great temple precinct of Antioch as priests carry garlands of flowers and bowls of incense. Their chants rise into a sky streaked with saffron light. At the rear of the procession, officials from Diocletian's court observe solemnly. This revival of traditional worship is not only a matter of religion, it is an attempt to bind the empire together through shared identity. Yet the spiritual world is shifting in deeper ways. Christianity, though still periodically persecuted, continues to grow quietly in towns and villages. You glimpse small gatherings of believers singing softly in private homes, their faces illuminated by simple oil lamps. They speak of hope in dark times of compassion and of a kingdom not built of stone but of spirit. They are still a minority, still vulnerable, yet their presence foreshadows another transformation waiting just beyond the horizon. Diocletian's gaze, however, remains fixed on the practical world structure, stability, and the endurance of the empire. Your path now carries you to the western provinces, where Maximian, Diocletian's co-emperor, works tirelessly to reinforce the frontier. You witness the tetrarchy in action, emperors and junior emperors collaborating across vast distances, their decisions coordinated like the movements of a great clock's hands. The system feels intricate, yet balanced, a remarkable attempt to distribute power without dissolving unity. In the cool forests of Gaul, you watch Caesar Constantius Chlorus negotiate with tribal leaders, securing peace through strategy rather than bloodshed. In the deserts of Egypt, you see Caesar Galerius drilling troops beneath the scorching sun, preparing for campaigns to the east. 4 rulers, 1 vision. The empire feels different now, less like the Rome of old and more like an organism adapting to survive. You return again to Nicomedia, where Diocletian reflects on his work. His palace stands quiet in the evening, bathed in amber light from rows of torches. He walks through its gardens, fingers brushing gently against rosemary leaves, eyes lost in thought. He knows he has reshaped the empire fundamentally, turning crisis into structure chaos, into order fragility, into resilience. But he also knows that these reforms depend on strength and cooperation. No system, no matter how well designed, is eternal. The empire must be carried forward by successors capable of honoring his work. As you walk beside him, the night breeze stirs the leaves, filling the garden with a soft rustling sound. Diocletian speaks softly, not to you, but to the world around him. He speaks of duty fulfilled, of burdens carried, of a lifetime given to restore balance. Soon he will make a decision unprecedented in Roman history, a decision that symbolizes not weakness, but wisdom. He will choose to lay down power. He will retire to a palace far from the demands of rule. He will step away from the storm he helped calm. And he will trust that the structure he forged will hold. For the first time in centuries, the Roman Empire stands united, fortified, and cautiously renewed. And now, as the sky deepens into a quiet starlit blue, you feel the approach of your final chapter, a peaceful walk through the twilight of the crisis, where the echoes of all you've witnessed settle into one long, gentle exhale. The twilight and the memory. You step into this final chapter as the sun slips slowly toward the horizon, casting the empire in a warm amber light. It is the soft hour, the hour when shadows lengthen across fields, when shepherds gather their flocks, when the wind grows cool and carries the scents of earthstone and ripening fruit. The long story you have followed, full of storms, struggles, and fragile triumphs, now begins to soften like a great river, easing toward a wider, calmer sea. You walk along an old Roman road near Salona Diocletian's chosen place of retirement. The stones beneath your feet are smooth with centuries of footsteps. Wild flowers grow along the edges, bending gently in the breeze. And ahead, bathed in the quiet glow of evening, stands a vast palace, not a fortress of ambition, but a refuge of peaceful surrender. This is where Diocletian, after years of relentless labor, chose to lay down the weight of empire. You enter the palace through a wide archway, where warm light spills from lanterns hung beneath marble columns. The rooms are open and airy, filled with cool stone breezy courtyards and gardens fragrant with rosemary sage and the soft bloom of Mediterranean flowers. Water trickles from calm fountains gently echoing against the walls. Everywhere you turn, the atmosphere seems to exhale. It is in this place so serene, so far removed from the turmoil of the crisis, that Diocletian spent his final years tending not armies or reforms, but the soil beneath his hands. You walk into one of his gardens now, where rows of cabbages, herbs, and fruit trees grow in the embrace of twilight. Imagine the emperor once surrounded by clashing armies and unimaginable burdens kneeling on the earth, cupping seedlings in his hands. The wind brushes through fig leaves. The soil warms beneath the setting sun. The empire for once asks nothing of him. There is something deeply peaceful in this, a reminder that even the greatest storms eventually pass, and even the most powerful rulers finally seek rest. That the empire reforged and steadied can continue without the constant weight of a single man's will. You walk slowly through the gardens, feeling the quiet rhythms of evening settle around you. The crisis you have traveled through, beginning with the death of Alexander Severus, unfolding through invasions, civil wars, plague, famine, economic collapse, and the fracturing of the empire, now feels distant, like a long dream, half remembered upon waking. Yet its lessons remain woven into the very soil beneath your feet. Rome survived not because it was invincible, but because it adapted. It changed its shape. It bent without breaking. It learned that endurance is not the absence of hardship, but the ability to rise after hardship has passed. As you wander deeper into the palace grounds, the evening sky shifts toward a deep, gentle blue. Stars begin to appear, first one, then a few, then many small lights scattered across a vast canvas. They resemble lamps burning in distant villas or campfires flickering across hillsides after a long day's march. The breeze cools your skin, crickets begin their soft song. You move to a terrace overlooking the Adriatic Sea. Below you, the water stretches out in calm, glassy ripples, catching the last hues of the fading sun. Fishing boats drift slowly across the surface, their lanterns glowing like floating stars. Waves lap softly against the shore, as if whispering old stories into the night. You sit for a while on a stone bench, letting the rhythmic hush of the sea lull your mind into stillness. The crisis feels far away now, its harsh edges softened by time and memory. You think of the soldier emperors rising and falling like sparks from a fire. You think of the divided realms, the Gallic Empire in the west, the Palmyrene Empire in the east, each born of necessity in a world shaken beyond its limits. You think of plague-ravaged fields and shuttered markets of broken coins and desperate prayers. And yet you also think of the resilience that endured through it all. The farmers who returned to their fields when the storms calmed, the merchants who reopened their stalls, the priests who kept fires burning in ancient temples, the soldiers who stood guard on distant frontiers, the families who clung to each other through darkness, The quiet faith, the steady labor, the shared human hope that outlived every emperor. This, too, is Rome, not just the marble, the legions, or the laws, but the countless lives lived beneath its wide horizon. As the last traces of daylight slip into the sea, you rise slowly and walk back along the palace halls. Lamps glow softly in niches carved into stone. Footsteps echo gently in the corridor. You feel the hush that comes when a long journey nears its end, a sense of completion, of gentle closure. You pause once more in the garden where Diocletian tended his plants. The night air carries the scent of damp earth and blooming herbs. A crescent moon rises above the palace rooftops, casting a silver sheen across the leaves. You can almost imagine the retired emperor himself walking these paths at night, listening to the wind in the tall grass, feeling the peace he once fought so fiercely to give to others. In these final quiet moments you understand something deeply. The crisis of the 3rd century was not merely a time of destruction. It was a time of transformation. From the turmoil emerged a different Rome, more complex, more structured, more resilient. A Rome that would continue for another century in the West and for another 1,000 years in the East. A Rome forever changed, yet still carrying the echoes of its ancient spirit. The air grows cooler, the lights dim, the world around you softens into shadow. And so you take one last slow breath of this ancient night, warm, gentle, scented, with the memory of fields, temples, rivers, and distant frontiers. Then, stepping onto the quiet road that leads away from Diocletian's palace, you let the soft rhythm of your footsteps guide you into the deeper calm of evening. The story fades like embers settling into ash. The empire sleeps beneath a mantle of stars, and you walk onward soothed by the twilight of history.